We have a few politics to discuss. Alright? We have a few politics to discuss. We're gonna... Hello, Philippe August. You have arrived. Actually, straight away. I have to be louder. Okay. Orber... Oh, wow. Huh. Okay, we're going to... Everyone. Okay, we're going to send this to the here, and there we go. Oh, might as well, of course. Okay. Dan is streaming early today. I will do my best to get him to raid. Who is Dan again? Wait, who's Dan? Do you mean the Destiny guy? Dan? Hello, Greater Rain. How are you? Feels like my hair here is starting to grow a bit more. I'm going to be talking about the Holocaust today, or rather about Auschwitz-Birkenau, otherwise known as Oświęcim in Polish. That is the name of the little town near which the infamous death camp has been built. The death camp of Auschwitz-Birkenau in near the city of Oświęcim. We're going to be talking about the warnings of the survivors of the Holocaust, of Auschwitz in particular, the warning of the rise of the far right. Oh, okay. So, whoever wants to take part in the discussion about, well, the horribleness of the Holocaust, death, and genocide, and how those events are tied to today, then I guess that's the stream to be. To listen to the tales of the genocide of the Jewish people and how these things, I think I'm going to rehash a very old at this point message. Hello, Vladimir. I'm going to rehash a message that I've heard from one survivor of Auschwitz. The message is, do not be indifferent. We're going to be... I keep always forgetting his name, even though I should have it memorized by now. From the Auschwitz survivor. Marian Turski. I have covered his speech during one of the anniversaries. The whole idea is that Auschwitz... That is a very fitting thing to say. Auschwitz was not a thing that fell from the sky. It was something that had a build-up, brick by brick by brick by brick. Events led to a death camp like Auschwitz being possible. The way society was prepared to accept something like that to happen, the way that the government laid the foundation for the um, industrial genocide to be executed. All these things, mm, we cannot assume that just because this sort of thing happened, was done by Nazi Germany on Polish territory, that it could not happen anywhere else. That things like that cannot happen anywhere. They are happening in other places, and the main message for today is not to be indifferent to those things. That was the main message of Marian Turski, and that is the main warning that the people that have survived the Holocaust have towards us, to be afraid of the rise of the far right, to be aware of it, and to not just turn away from the genocides that are happening right now. You know what? Well, let's just get into it. Let's just get straight into it. Let's not waste time. I'm feeling like today we should be very expedient with our time, right? We don't want to. I wouldn't want to waste anybody's time, so. Where's the camera? Jesus Christ. Okay. Here we go. We're gonna be talking about Auschwitz. This is the infamous gate to Auschwitz-Birkenau, which says Arbeit macht frei. Work makes you free. Person walks through Auschwitz-Birkenau camp before a ceremony marking the 80th anniversary of the camp's liberation in Oświęcim, Poland, on January 27th. Hold on, what? Oh my god. Right? January 27th. It doesn't do any good for your heart, for your mind, for anything, said Holocaust survivor Iona Lax, 94, about her return to Nazi Germany's Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. But it's necessary, she said. It's necessary for the world to know. I actually visited Auschwitz-Birkenau as a fairly young teen. I went to a trip to Auschwitz-Birkenau. I've went through all the facilities, through the barracks, through the places where people worked, through the places where people slept, where they were tortured, they were deprived of sleep. I went through the little stables where children were kept. Those places were filled with little drawings of children that dreamt about their futures when they would leave the camp. Some of them dreamt of having a specific career. Some of them dreamt of simple things like riding a horse. Some of them of just sleeping on the grass. And of course, I've seen the infamous gas chambers. I think some of the things that make the biggest impact are those children's drawings and the collection of cut hair collected on a giant pile, the collection of glasses, shoes, bags taken from people that entered the camp and were piled on huge like mounds of those things. Monday marks Holocaust Memorial Day and the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz camp complex, where Lax spent more than a year when she was only about 12 years old, so she must have been in that place where children drew their little dreams about what they would do when they would survive. She and her twin sister Miriam experienced horrors in the inhumane medical experiments of SS physical Josef Mengele. Lax was initially lined up to be murdered in gas chambers, but her older sister saved her by shouting that the twins should not be separated. Lax, who was just a child when Hitler invaded her native Poland, told CNN the suffering that followed it is absolutely impossible to understand. As time passes over, things are being forgotten, Lax said, noting that few are left from her generation to speak out. The world hasn't learned its lessons from what happened. What was done? Approximately 1.1 million people were murdered at the concentration camp from 1940 to 1945. Many of them Jews, but also other victims of the Third Reich, including Poles, the Roma, and Soviet prisoners of war. Michelle Bornstein, who survived for 7 months inside Auschwitz as a child, said that nothing will be easy about returning to the site. This is like Holocaust survivors take part in the ceremony to mark the 80th anniversary of liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau in Oświęcim, Poland, on January 27th. It can never be easy. I don't think going through something like this, surviving, I don't think it can ever get easier on a person to survive something like that. I think that it leaves a mark on a person forever. You know? Streams of mourners, young and old, laid down candles at the former concentration camp site to mark Monday's anniversary. Some bowed their heads or took a knee in front of a line of wreaths. Others wore stripped blue and white items of clothing, like scarves and hats, resembling the uniforms prisoners wore once forced to wear. Later in the day, hundreds gathered in a large marquee lit with bright red, pink, and blue lights to hear the stories of Holocaust survivors, including Marian Turski, 98, who was sent to Auschwitz in 1944. Marian Turski is the creator of the famous 11th commandment, do not be indifferent. I talked about him already when discussing this topic today, and we have covered his whole speech when I still used a YouTube avatar. We have covered the speech of Marian Turski. Marian Turski is a pretty famous person, a historian who really puts emphasis on how we should not expect horrible things not to be impossible in places like, for example, the United States of America or any other place. That horrible events of Auschwitz can happen anywhere if we allow them to, if we are indifferent to the suffering of others, if we are indifferent to other people being dehumanized, marginalized, and turned into a group that can be targeted for destruction. Turski said people's thoughts should go towards the millions of victims who will never tell us what they experienced or they felt, just because they were consumed by that mass destruction. Those who lived to see freedom, there were hardly none, so few, and now there's only a handful. World leaders also gathered in Poland to mark the camp's liberation, including Britain's King Charles, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and French President Emmanuel Macron. None spoke at the event, which instead aimed to focus on the voices of survivors. But Charles did leave a moving message in a visitor's book after he took a tour of the former death camp, which is now in a museum. Remembering what took place here and those who were so cruelly murdered is a duty, a sacred duty that must be protected, he wrote, according to PA Media. Being here today, hearing the stories of those who experienced its horrors, seeing the shoes of children whose lives were taken when they just began, and walking the paths upon which such cruelty was inflicted, is something that I will never forget. And this is Marian Turski giving the speech, the welcoming address during the ceremony of the 80th anniversary at Auschwitz. Imagine going through the most horrible of horrors, only to return, only to plead with the audience, plead with as many people as possible. Do not let this happen again. Do not be indifferent to suffering. All of Auschwitz's remaining survivors were invited to the commemorations and could bring one person for support. We're fully aware of how physically demanding and emotionally taxing attending the commemoration event at the site of the former camp can be for them, the Auschwitz Memorial and Museum said in a statement. One of the symbols of the 80th anniversary is a freight train car, which was placed directly in front of the main gate. The train car is dedicated to the memory of the approximately 420,000 Hungarian Jews who were deported to Auschwitz. This is the freight car. The United Nations declared January 27 as the International Holocaust Memorial Day in 2005. Observed annually, it marks the liberation of Auschwitz in 1945 and remembers the 6 million Jews who lost their lives under the Nazis. Germany's Scholz said in a Monday statement, sons, daughters, mothers, fathers, friends, neighbors, grandparents, more than 1 million individuals with dreams and hopes were murdered in Auschwitz by Germans. We mourn their deaths and express our deepest sympathy. We'll never forget them, not today, not tomorrow. The museum says the event at Auschwitz offers the chance for shared commemoration and global reflection. It comes at a time of mounting anti-Semitism in Europe, fueled by conflict in the Middle East, which saw Israel launch a war on Gaza. All right. And I think the most important thing is the rise of the far right. This looming, creeping rise of the populist far right that endangers not just Jewish people, it endangers us all. It endangers that a new group will be targeted for destruction. Any group can be targeted for destruction like this. It doesn't necessarily need to be Jewish people. It can be any group. No group is immune to hatred as long as it's politically expedient for the far right. And what worries me about this is the rise of the AfD party, Alternative for Deutschland, for example, in Germany, that says that Germany should be far more friendly to its Nazi past, which says that Poland parts of Poland at least belong to Germany, that says that Hitler was a communist slash socialist, that the Nazi Party was a party of socialists, and it worries me even more that one of the richest people in the world, Elon Musk, openly supports them, openly attends their rallies, and says that the AfD party is the only possible savior of Germany. It scares me that we are having a resurgence of the far right, especially after Trump's victory in the US election. 80 years after Auschwitz liberation, survivor warns of rise of radical right. Leon Weintraub, 99-year-old survivor of Auschwitz photo, Pap Łukasz Gągulski. A 99-year-old Auschwitz survivor. This is exactly this whole thing that we did just now, talking about how awful Auschwitz was, talking about how we must not be indifferent, talking about how, well, it is different. It is difficult for people to even return, to even think about what happened in the past. The people that went through the deepest depths of hell return, even though it's very difficult for them both physically and emotionally. They return to Auschwitz not just to commemorate what happened to them, not just to remember personally what happened to them. A lot of them return to Auschwitz to offer a warning. A lot of them return to Auschwitz to say, please don't make the same mistakes again. Do not let others suffer like we did. Beware of the far right rise. Beware of being indifferent, of looking the other way as people are being treated unjustly. Beware of normalizing certain types of discrimination. Beware of thinking that this much is acceptable and that it will not go any further. It will go further and further and further until a new Auschwitz is built. And we can see examples of that. We can see examples of indifference in how we are indifferent as to what is happening in Sri Lanka. We can see the indifference of people to what is happening in Gaza, which Gaza we will be talking about today as well. We can see the indifference to what is happening in Sudan, Myanmar. Indifference is surrounding us. And again, the people that went through some of the worst events in the history of humankind warn us, do not be indifferent. Do not turn your eyes away. We cannot let history repeat itself. Auschwitz survivor has warned against contemporary rise of the radical right in comments at commemoration in Poland to mark 80 years since the Nazi concentration camp was liberated. Leon Weintraub, who was deported to Auschwitz in 1944 at the age of 18, said the ceremonies on Monday, attended by world leaders, served as a warning against the increasingly loud movement of radical and anti-democratic right-wingers. So things like the Alternative for Deutschland in Germany. The far right has been growing in strength around Europe, including in Germany, fueled by concerns over immigration, which is another topic. A huge topic that is very underreported. Many people just don't talk about it because it is normalized to treat immigrants. It is normalized at this point to treat refugees, asylum seekers as invaders, as people that come to destroy the country, as people that are not to be treated equally, as people that can be discarded, as people that can be thrown away without a care what happens to them. And never again, never again, and looks like again and again until humanity learns the lesson. There's a very sarcastic saying about the never again, and that is never again will the Germans kill Jewish people in the 1940s. That is the most sarcastic interpretation of the never again. Never again. Another survivor, Marian Turski, age 98, told listeners at the commemorations in Poland, in the contemporary world today, we see a huge rise in anti Semitism, and that is precisely the anti Semitism that led to the Holocaust. He added, let us not be afraid to oppose conspiracy theories that everything bad in the world is the result of secretive groups conspiring, with Jews often being blamed. Listening to the ceremonies in front of Auschwitz, infamous main gates, where leaders including German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Britain's King Charles, and French President Emmanuel Macron. Estimates say that Nazi Germany murdered over 1.1 million people, mostly Jews, in the Auschwitz-Birkenau camp located near the southern Polish town of Oświęcim. On January 27, 1945, Soviet troops reached the area on a date that is now commemorated internationally as Holocaust Memorial Day. Let's not make a mistake here. The goal was not to liberate Auschwitz. None of the fighters in World War II ever put stopping the Holocaust as the goal, as part of the goals of World War II. That was never part of the goals of World War II. It just happened along the way. It just happened as the Soviet Union was fighting the Germans, and they used this as a stop for the troops. That is the reality. It has never been a direct goal to stop the genocide, to stop the horror. And it never is. It never is. Look at the conflict in Gaza. Nobody talks about finishing the horror that is happening. In fact, right now the opposite. The opposite seems to be the order of the day, which again, I won't be talking about it now. We will be talking about it a bit later. But stopping atrocities like this is never on the agenda. It's never one of the main goals, ever. Holocaust survivor Tova Friedman, 86, told the ceremony that when she arrived at the Auschwitz-Birkenau camp, she could smell a terrible stink. She said she can still remember looking into the eyes of a German shepherd dog. She added, as I was being beaten mercilessly by a guard for fidgeting, for not being able to stand still for hours, I looked into my mother's eyes. She was pleading with me, don't cry. And I didn't. At 5, I had the rebellion in me that I would not let them know the pain they are inflicting on me. Friedman said she thought it was normal that as a Jewish child they all had to die. Ahead of Monday's ceremonies, the director of the museum located at the former camp said the event this year would be focused on the survivors. Piotr Tsiviński told TVP World that at the Liberation Anniversary ceremony 20 years ago, there were 1,500 survivors, while 10 years ago there were 300. And this year, there would be around 50. I don't want to exaggerate, but I don't want to exaggerate, but this is probably the last round anniversary with still an important group of them. Survivors, he said. So we want to focus on them and their history. Yeah, by the next round anniversary, none of the survivors might be alive anymore. We will have to we won't be able to hear any new stories, any new accounts, any new warnings, any new lessons. It will be gone forever. And perhaps, hopefully, the memory of what transpired will not be gone with them. Perhaps people will not forget. Perhaps people will take something from this. Maybe they will not be indifferent. Maybe they will fight so that people will not suffer today. And a lot of people are suffering today. It's undeniable. That is the main lesson to be derived of this whole thing. Do not be indifferent. Is there anything else? I'm pretty sure I had a little bit more. We will talk a little bit about Auschwitz itself. I'll probably go to the toilet for a moment. Write in the chat if you have any thoughts, if you have any comments, if you have any questions. I can tell you a little bit. After all, Poland was the main staging ground of the Holocaust, and I'm Polish, so I'll be Polish Jewish for that matter. I'll be right back, and then we can continue discussing. So yeah, again, if you have any thoughts, questions, anything at all, don't be shy to write, and I'll look at the chat as I always do, and I'll address it in some way. Oh, I'm back. Well, there are some questions. Okay. It is sad to think that those who remember will be no more. Well, it is up to us to remember. Sooner or later, everybody dies. We will die. And it is up to us to keep the memory going. And more importantly, I don't even think that. The thing is that I don't think that even remembering the specific event is what the most important thing is. I think that there's something more to remember. The more important lesson to remember is just how much suffering humans are capable of inflicting on other humans. Just how much we need to actively work for a world that will not have such suffering happen. The thing that we need to remember is not to be indifferent. Like it's not about this specific event of Auschwitz, of the Holocaust. It's more about remembering that this could happen again, and not just to this specific group. That we have to show more humanity towards others, that we have to not let this happen again. I think this is the more important type of remembering than just knowing that in this and this year this and that happened. I think that there's a deeper remembrance to be had here. We see, what do you think about concentration camp as a whole, and which one of them in your opinion is the most horrible? Well, of course, you have the concentration camps that were the work camps, the labor camps in which people are worked, mostly they were used as labor. And those camps, of course, also starved people to death and killed them. But there were also the camps that were designated as death camps. Auschwitz-Birkenau was one such camp. It was designated as a death camp. And those camps were primarily designed to um, kill people in a systematic, industrialized way. And I think those camps were the most horrible. The camps such as Auschwitz were the most horrible. It is here where all the worst medical experiments took place on people. It is here where people were taken to the gas chambers and killed. It is this was just a killing factory. So I think this is by far the worst type of a concentration camp, yes. A little bit of a heavy subject, but it's okay. We are, I think I have an audience of mature people. On this day 80 years ago, soldiers from the Soviet Command 16th Army of the 1st Ukrainian Front, this is pretty important. Soldiers from the Soviet commanded 60th Army of the 1st Ukrainian Front liberated Auschwitz. At the time, they didn't know they had exposed the central element of the Nazi death machine. Despite its physical state, liberation was not considered major news at the time, because the liberation was never the main concern of any parties involved in the war. I will keep repeating it until I'm blue on the face. Tens of thousands of prisoners had already been evacuated in the preceding weeks on death marches westward by Nazi overseers. By the way, a lot of the prisoners after liberation were still kept in the camps. That's another story that we could be talking about. That a lot of prisoners after the liberation were still held for some time in the camps. So again, uh, despite the physical state, tens of thousands of prisoners had already been evacuated, quote unquote, in the preceding weeks on death marches westwards by their Nazi overseers, leaving just a handful of inmates behind. Around 1,000 remained in the main camp, 6,000 in Birkenau, and another 600 in the Monowitz labor camp. Ivan Martynushkin, a lieutenant in the Red Army, later recalled, "We had a feeling we had done something good, a very good deed, and that we had somehow fulfilled our duty." He continued, we saw emaciated, tortured, impoverished people. We could tell from their eyes that they were happy to be saved from this hell." Even so, the liberation of Auschwitz was not treated as a particularly significant event, either by these troops or the press. That would come later once the full horror was revealed. And also in the Soviet Union, the Holocaust was not really spoken about much. So, of the 1.3 million people that were sent to Auschwitz, it is thought that 1.1 million died. Around 1 million, it is estimated, were Jews. No other wartime camp saw more death. Despite the staggering nature of these figures, Auschwitz's beginnings were on a smaller scale. The Germans had already created 6 concentration camps: Dachau, Sachsenhausen, Buchenwald, Flossenburg, Mauthausen, and Ravensbrück. But Auschwitz on the fringes of the southern Polish town of Oświęcim would be the first one in the new Reich. The year was 1940, and the early successes of Hitler's Blitzkrieg necessitated more camps in Germany's newly seized territories. 39-year-old Rudolf Höss, who had already carved out a reputation as a rising star in Germany's concentration camp system, was appointed the head of this latest protective custody camp. He had to supervise its construction from a collection of dilapidated and vermin-infested former Polish Army's barracks, grouped around a horse-breaking yard on the edge of town, wrote author Lawrence Ress. By the way, Jewish people were selected to help build the camp. They were selected for their skill, and they hoped that if they were selected for work, they would be spared. The surrounding area could scarcely have been more depressing. This land between the Sowa and Vistula rivers was flat and drab, the climate damp and unhealthy. After being registered, shaved, and showered, Polish prisoners were then photographed for posterity. You can see the photos of the prisoners. Though far from ideal, in its favor Auschwitz boasted excellent railway links and a central geographical position. It was also easier than other urban centers to shut off from the outside world. Within weeks of the appointments of Höss, the first prisoners arrived. 30 Germans transferred from Sachsenhausen. However, they would not serve their time as inmates but as kapos, guards, brutally overseeing a transport of 728 Poles, mainly university students, from Tarnów. Reaching Auschwitz on June 14, 1940, it was his first wave of Polish arrivals that was handed the task of constructing a functioning camp complex from the pre-existing buildings. Although Auschwitz is indelibly associated with the Holocaust. It started life as a Nazi dumping ground for Polish undesirables, political prisoners, the intelligentsia, former soldiers, and others that were perceived as threat to German rule. Upon registration, these prisoners were assigned a number in place of their name, undressed, shaved, and showered before being handed their new set of belongings, a coarse-stripped uniform and clog-like shoes. Photographed for posterity, they would then be ushered to their barracks to begin their new lives. The work was often backbreaking, and daily life defined by scant food and harsh punishments meted out in the camp's notorious Block 11. Among the sadistic innovations here were claustrophobic standing cells, where prisoners would be kept standing for days with just a small hatchway allowing for air. I saw that. When I visited Auschwitz-Birkenau, I saw these standing cells. We were allowed to come close to them, look inside them, and we were explained exactly how people were uh, taken inside and how they were built in such a way that we would not be able to crouch or sit or do anything. You would need to stand. You could only stand. That was a form of torture, and they would stand like that throughout the night, and then in the morning they would be forced to go and work. In all, it is thought that as many as 130,000 Poles were sent to Auschwitz, with only around half of this number surviving. Disease, starvation, penal exercises, beatings, hangings, and fennel injections to the heart all contributed to this death toll, but it is for its gas chambers that Auschwitz is most notorious. The first of the gassings took place in September 1941, with Poles and Soviet POWs being the first known victims. Within weeks, construction began on a new camp, the vast Auschwitz II-Birkenau complex. The first of the gassing took place in September 1941, with Poles. This is the gas, the oven thing, where people's bodies will be burned. It would be Birkenau that would become the focal point of the Nazis' final solution to the Jewish question, and it was to hear that the bulk of incoming Jews, as well as Roma and Sinti people, would be transported via cattle wagons directed from all corners of occupied Europe. Home to immense gas chambers and crematoriums at its peak, around 12,000 Jews were being gassed in Birkenau each day. Life or death, Jews are selected on arrival to Birkenau photo, and the selection process went like this. People were grouped and divided into two. Is it compulsory to visit as part of the curriculum in Poland? No, it is not. I visited in a trip that was not part of any curriculum. It is not mandatory. But I did visit it. Also, welcome to the stream. I'm not sure if I've seen you here before. So people would be divided, and anybody under a certain age, so very young children, anyone with a disability, anyone over a certain age would be immediately selected and sent to the gas chambers. They would be said, one group would be, and women of course, one group would be sent to work immediately, and the other group that would be sent to the gas chambers would be told that they need to be washed first. And that group that would be sent to be washed would be then sent to the gas chambers to be immediately killed because they were deemed not fit to even do any sort of work. This is what is being referred to with the selected on arrival. There was a segregation that happened right away for those who would be taken to the gas chamber straight away. There you go. It says so here even. Having first herded those selected for death into the gas chambers, guards would then drop pallets of Cyclone B gas into the sealed chambers, with the killing process taking around 20 minutes. 20 minutes of suffering from suffocation from gas. In this way, the Nazis could reflect with pride on mastering the art of mechanized murder. Today, Auschwitz stands as a powerful testament to the single largest genocide in history, a point reflected by the number of people that make the somber pilgrimage to visit, now closing in on one pre-pandemic levels. Last year saw just over 1.8 million people pass through its gate. The cynical inscription above the gateway bears an upside-down B, a deliberate act of subtle defiance. Bearing the motto Arbeit macht frei, work sets you free, the cynical inscription above the gateway to the original parent camp bears an upside-down B, a deliberate act of subtle defiance by the Polish labor detail that built it. Yet, as iconic as this is, it is the exhibits beyond that horrify the most. Inside the former barracks buildings lie vast piles of booty stolen from the new arrivals, from prams and prosthetic limbs to spectacles and shoes and hair, of course. There's a huge pile of hair shaved from people. Retaining a sinister and suffocating air, each of these bleak brick prisons blocks reveals new trauma. Arguably, however, it is Birkenau that carries an even bigger impact. Though devoid of the wealth of exhibits found in the parent camp and largely destroyed as the Nazis fled, its sheer size contrasts sharply against the claustrophobic nature of the parent camp. It overwhelms. Wandering amid the ruined chimney stacks and through the handful of shadowy stable-like living quarters that survive, it is impossible not to be struck by humanity's capacity for calculated cruelty. Auschwitz will forever remain the black hole of the entire human history, wrote politician Isaac Herzog, and these words ring true when visiting this void. I'm actually not sure if there were larger genocides. I'm not sure if there were genocides in which there were people, more than 6 million people killed. You can look it up. List of genocides. Okay, maybe oh my gosh. Biggest in history. The top 10 worst genocide in history. What were they? Maybe I'll just try looking that up. Not after we define it as a crime against humanity, I will guess, legally. Yeah. 10 worst genocide in history. There's only a book that is recommended. I don't see okay. Alright. So what now? Any thoughts? Any thoughts of what's being what was being talked about right now? This is a pretty I realize that this is a pretty heavy subject. I also believe that there are many important things to be derived from this, right? Don't you think? Borderline auto depression subject, this one. Well, I think it's still important to talk about it. Because once at least we start realizing the sheer scale, the sheer suffering that has been inflicted, I don't think there were larger genocide. I know. Haven't we covered larger No, I don't think so. What genocide will be larger than the Holocaust? I honestly cannot think of any that was larger. Like, okay, let's see. Maybe the Nanking Massacre? Nanjing Massacre? Pre-World War II? Like what? Rwanda? Rwanda was no. No, not no. No. Rwanda genocide was people going out and killing people with machetes. Do you really think that the Rwanda genocide was on a bigger scale than the Holocaust? I don't think so. If anything, it was much smaller, I would think. Because how many people can you kill with just machetes? Like victims, 250,000 to 500,000 Tutsi women deaths. Estimated 500,000 to 800,000 Tutsis. Right? Because let's remember that this genocide was conducted by people going with machetes and chopping people to death. Like, the reason why the Holocaust was so big, why it was so large, was because the genocide was industrialized. That's the main reason. Is because of the creation of the death camps, the gas chambers. It's because people were just people were moved to the location by train. Yeah, just as evil. I mean, genocide is not about numbers, right? Like we're talking, we're saying that the Holocaust was the largest scale wise, right? But genocide is genocide, whether or not you kill 50 people, 100 people, 1,000, or 10 million, right? It doesn't, it doesn't, just because a genocide kills less amount of people, it doesn't make it less evil, you know? It's genocide is genocide. Genocide is not a numbers game. It's the act of the destruction of a people, and the act of a destruction of a people is evil no matter what the number you will put on it. Like if there exists a group that consists only of 200 people and you eradicate that group, that is a genocide and it is evil. Yeah. Oh yeah, there was one. You're right. You are right. Yeah. The in India, yeah. That was larger. Yeah. That was larger. You're right. That was definitely larger. The only reason why people won't say that one was larger is that's because it is not acceptable. It is not widely acceptable to say that the British Empire did a genocide. But yes, you're right. We did cover the British famine, and that genocide was bigger. Yeah. Not even sure why I forgot about that one, but yeah, you're definitely right about that. Um, mm, there was also the Irish famine between 1976 and 1902. Somewhere between 12 and 29 million people starved to death in India. hmm However, because the intent for this suffering was not outright disdain for the Bengali people, specifically, it is difficult to attribute to the event the act of genocide. Churchill and the genocide myth. So people just don't want to classify it as such. I think the Spanish and Portuguese knew that their disease were destroying South African indigenous peoples, while themselves shrugged most of it off, but not industrialized and many. Yeah, yeah. Let me see. A favorite trope of the current Black Lives Madness and its apologists has been the alleged infamy of Britain's most cherished hero, Winston Churchill, charged with everything from mere racism to actual genocide. The worst accusation is that of deliberately starving 4 million Bengalis to death in 1943. So there you go. The Churchill Project. Really unbiased. What an unbiased side. But yes, Greater Rent is right. If we went with the Indian famines, then that one just takes the cake straight up. Yeah, yeah. See, it's just an example that it's not really important to focus on the specific event. What is important for us to not let things like that happen again, okay? Because there's also a risk that if we do focus on specific events, that we will be blinded to what's really important. And what really is important is that these things are happening also today, that these people are being killed, starved, people are being discriminated against, and that we can do something about it now by not being indifferent. I think that is the most important lesson that the people that survive such events want to teach us. Does that make sense? But yeah, I think it is important too. And I am glad that I've been reminded about the India thing. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? A farce. Do you think genocide is likely in the US? Yes, I do believe so. If the conditions are right, interestingly enough, Marian Turski, after the war, went to the United States. Marian Turski went to the United States and uh, marched with Martin Luther King. He took part in the march for the freedom of black people. And he was asked, Marian Turski was asked, how do you think, why do you think it's possible that something like this could have been done by Nazi Germany, that something like that could have happened uh, in that part of the world? And Marian Turski said to him, it could happen here. It could happen here. It can happen here. So yes, it is likely in the US. It can very well happen in the US. It can happen anywhere. That's the insidious nature of it. It can happen anywhere. No place in the world is just immune to genocides happening. Once people are being otherized, once people are being treated as lesser, once people are once laws are being introduced in order to treat people worse and worse and worse and worse, once the society is being not programmed to see it as something increasingly normal, that's the laying of the groundwork for a genocide. Like the fact that, for example, immigrants, asylum seekers are being framed as criminal aliens, murderers, rapists from mental asylums, from prisons. That's part of the dehumanization process, right? That's part of the thing that allows anything to be done to the group. You can do anything to the invaders. It's war. They want to invade. Anything can be due to them in retaliation. Right? Yeah, the US did that to the natives, but I think greater range meant, um, is it plausible in modern US? Yes, It absolutely can happen in the US. Does anybody remember migrants are poisoning the blood of our country? Exactly. That is exactly what I'm talking about. The normalization of treating people as otherly, as lesser, as a group that needs to be dealt with one way or the other. That no methods are severe enough to combat this threat. We have to remember, and this is again something that I have to remind time and time again. The act of genocide is not planned as this evil deed that we are evil and we want to just kill as many people as possible because we are evil. No, people that perpetuate genocide actually see themselves as moral agents, believe it or not. They see a group, and they think to themselves, we want to build a better future. We want to build, this is why genocide is called the bastard child of the Enlightenment. That is the way that often genocide is being referred to as the bastard child of the Enlightenment. It's because there's we are building a more prosperous future, and there's a group here. There is a group that does not want to let us do it. They are standing in the way. If only they would not stand in the way, we would be able to build that better world. And it is not pleasant. We find no pleasure in doing this. It is a duty that we simply must do. It is an unpleasant chore that we have to perform in order to move towards that better future. In fact, the death of the people is not the goal in and itself. The goal is that better future on the horizon that will come after the group is gone. It is an important thing that differentiates genocide from other types of crimes like mass murder or any other thing. That is a big distinction that needs to be taken into account. A person that commits genocide very often will not suffer the same uh, levels of being haunted by conscience. Like a murderer can feel this, I've done something bad. I know that I've done something bad, and this can haunt them. But many times it has been observed, it has been recorded that people who have committed genocide, they will not feel like that. They will go home and they will have a feeling of having done something good, even if in the process they had to do things that were unpleasant. That they can still go home and feel like morally good people because they were fulfilling their duty. They did not fail their community. They were working for that better future, you know. And um, Constante Gebert, an author of a very good book about genocide, actually talked to perpetrators of the Rwanda genocide. He had the opportunity to have interviews with people who did the genocide, who went out with those machetes and chopped people to death. He interviewed people who would go and uh, kill the neighborly family. They lived and they had neighbors and they were part of the genocide. They killed them, and they would say things like, "I have not, I have not," and they would say things like, human is a huge animal. It is hard work to chop a human to bits using a machete. I could not fail my community. I had to do my duty. I could not be a person that would just, I'm not a person that just sits on the sidelines and just allows other people to do the work. I had to be part of my community and do this work. See, there's this also uh, this sense of fulfilling a duty towards the bigger group. It's never I'm doing this before because it brings me great joy. It's always this sort of I don't want to disappoint people around me. I want to do what my responsibility. I want to fulfill my responsibility and I want to build work towards that better future. Right? So there you go. That's I think that's an important thing about genocide that should be talked about time and time and time again. In fact, I think I will try to get Constante Gebert on stream somehow. I will try to get him to talk to me. I think it's possible since he's like a friend of my mom's. So yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? I'm not let me see how long I've been talking about Auschwitz and the genocide and stuff like that. How long? Oh my gosh. I went to the toilet for a minute. Maybe I am too dry in my delivery. Maybe I should um, use more flowery sentences so that it's a bit longer. So that it's not bam, 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 done, next. No thoughts? No additional questions? There are key component takeaways that everybody should be taking from things like this. And these are we must be very wary of the rise of the far right. And two, we must not be indifferent. I think those are the. If there's anything to be taken from this, it is these two things. Absolutely. These two things must be absolutely taken from these events. Okay, I take it that everybody feels like they've learned all they needed to learn. That we have taken a little part in the commemoration of Auschwitz liberation, and I assume we can move on to the next topics. Yeah? Does anybody feel that this topic has been exhausted? Yeah? Okay. I guess we'll be switching gears now. We'll be switching gears to. I have a few things. I have Belarus. I have executive order from Trump. I have clean out the Gaza Strip. Well, on a lighter note, speaking of movies, I have to show Lucy Smokey and the Bandit and the. Oh, true. Trump news, yes. There will be Trump news today, absolutely. We will. Oh, he just took office not long ago, so something is happening around Trump all the time now. He keeps signing executive orders, he keeps uh, offering really strange radical plans. So there's never a shortage of news around Trump right now. That's for sure. So we have at least two um, Trump related news today. Hitler's piece of. So yeah. At least it's gonna be long 4 years. Hello, fake Alec Cal Parker. I never expected you to be white. We've just finished talking about the 80th anniversary of Auschwitz. We were talking about why it's important. We were talking about how the survivors are warning us about the rise of the far right. And we were talking about how we should not be indifferent. And those are basically the main things that I would like everybody to take from this. To remember that these things are happening now and that there are lives that we can be advocating for right now. There's genocide, there are ongoing genocides happening now. Right? That's pretty important. Yeah? And now we're going to be moving to new topics. We have a few topics set up. Oh yeah, we're gonna also be talking about, yeah, definitely. So I have at least a few topics lined up. Okay, let's go. Let's just. I don't think I need to talk about Zelensky backs Polish request to exhume Volhynia massacre victims. That it's been greenlit. I don't think that. I don't think that even needs a comment. That's been already known. It's been already known that Poland and Ukraine are making strides in order to once and for all settle the World War II tensions between World War II related tensions between the two countries, which will lead to much greater cooperation. Which, oh my God, that's really needed right now. It's really needed for Ukraine to have solid allies to be able to rely to, because God, that's getting more and more rare, as it turns out. That is just a fact. Right, but that's not really what I'll be focusing on. Auschwitz. This is an interesting one. I'm not sure how, uh, if we're gonna be dedicating this. I'm not sure if we're gonna be dedicating a lot of time to this topic, but certainly an interesting little fact that the current, for now, president um, Andrzej Duda has said that Nord Stream pipeline should be dismantled. I'm saying this is interesting because recently there have been a lot of different varying opinions when it comes to Nord Stream. There is one, I would say, leading line of thought that Europe as a whole should become completely energy independent from Russia, that it should not get gas or anything else from Russia. And there are countries that say they want things from Russia, they want gas, oil, and whatever, and what have you from Russia. Those countries like Slovakia, for example. And then there are emerging far right countries in Germany, such as the mentioned before Alternative for Deutschland, that not only says that Germany should continue taking gas from Russia, that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline should be restarted, but also wants to destroy any semblance of taking care of the environment while doing it. Alternative for Deutschland says we need to use more coal, we need to reactivate Nord Stream 2, and we need to dismantle all of the windmills and any of the natural energy sources. We need to dismantle them. That is the AfD position. So I think it interesting that Andrzej Duda would take this extreme other direction approach and say, no, we should not only not use any oil from Russia, we should outright dismantle the Nord Stream pipelines, not to be even tempted to do so ever again. Poland's president has called for the Nord Stream pipelines to be dismantled, saying that gas supplies from Russia to Western Europe should never resume, even if a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine is reached. So I would say this is quite an extreme position. I understand it definitely as a person that is from Eastern Europe, but I also believe that that is a position that Western Europe will simply not go for. I don't believe that Western Europe will agree to completely dismantle the pipelines, and I don't believe that Western Europe will ever agree to never ever again um, never ever again resuming the oil flow. Okay? The two Nord Stream pipelines were built to carry natural gas under the Baltic Sea from Russia to northern Germany, built by the Russian company Gazprom. The infamous Gazprom, whose many top workers have been met with unfortunate accidents. A lot of top brass in Gazprom has had strange accidents and they all died. Nord Stream 1 was shut down in 2022, and while Nord Stream 2 never became operational, both pipelines were damaged by explosions that same year. I can only hope that European leaders will learn lessons from Russia's aggression against Ukraine and that they will push through a decision to never restore the pumping of gas through this pipeline, Duda told the BBC while attending the World Economic Forums in Davos. I believe the Nord Stream pipeline should be dismantled, Duda said. This pipeline causes a very big threat to Ukraine, to Poland, to Slovakia, but also to other Central European countries. So, as I've told you before, I can understand why a president of a Eastern European country would want the pipelines to be dismantled permanently because, well, it fuels Russia's economy. It fuels Russia's ability to wage war on its neighbors, to increase its capitalism, to expand its borders. Russia's borders never end. That is the reasoning. And my fear is that Western Europe's approach to this will be basically, well, you know what? Peace has been achieved. Maybe things are not as bad anymore. Maybe we could slowly but surely return to business as usual. Maybe we could start taking some gas from Russia. Maybe we could start taking some oil from Russia. And that would, of course, include resuming the flow through Nord Streams. Right? That is a genuine thing that I'm worried about when it comes to Western Europe. It's very big eagerness to return to business as usual. It is a threat from the point of view of energy, from the point of view of the military, but also a huge economic threat because it means a domination of Russia over Europe in the economic sense. he added. Trump's impact on Ukraine. In terms of potential for peace between Russia and Ukraine, now that President Donald Trump is in office, Duda maintained that any talks must include Ukraine. I am saying that in my capacity as President of the Republic of Poland, as a neighbor to Ukraine, and also as President of a country that has had very hard historic experiences itself, he told the BBC. Referring to World War II and the Yalta Conference, Duda noted that Poland was excluded from critical discussions and later found itself under Soviet influence. That was Poland after World War II was basically just given away in the name of world peace, in the name of stability, which I'm afraid could be done again with Ukraine, for the world of world stability, for the world, for the no, in the name of staving off World War III, in the name of averting nuclear disaster. Certain agreements were made above our heads, and then we found ourselves behind the Iron Curtain for almost 50 years, he said. Duda stressed that it would be a violation of international law for Russia to retain any Ukrainian territories it has occupied. Russia does not care about international law. Let's be honest here. Let's be like, Russia treats international law as a joke. In fact, not just Russia treats international law as a joke. Many countries treat international law as a joke. And that includes the United States, Western Europe, Poland. Like, don't talk to me about international law when Netanyahu was promised that he will not be arrested even though he has an ICC warrant on himself. Like, Poland went out of his way to promise that the warrant will not be respected. So the respect towards international law is the lack of it is a huge problem. So saying that something is a violation of international law does not feel like a strong argument to me, because there are no actual strong mechanisms in place to enforce international law right now, unfortunately. There are no strong who could force the United States to abide by international law when the US said openly that if the ICC arrested a US citizen, the US would simply use its military force to break that person out? What sort of accountability can we be talking about when it comes to international law? Like, there is a huge problem. So no, Russia will not care that it's some sort of a violation of international law for it to retain any Ukrainian territories. It just won't. Because very little countries in reality care about international law. That is the sad reality of the situation. Right? The international community cannot agree, and it is unacceptable that Russia would take certain territories of Ukraine and keep them by force. This is unacceptable. We must not let Russia win this war, the Polish president said. Unfortunately, under Trump, that probability is higher than lower, that Russia will keep certain territories. I would be very surprised if Trump pushed for a peace that would revert Ukraine to its 1991 borders. President Donald Trump, as the leader of the most powerful country within NATO, as the leader of the most powerful economy, will be of key importance. Yeah, and I'm afraid he will not really be of key help to making it so that Ukraine will um, return to its 1991 borders. I don't think so. I'm afraid I am not hopeful for that outcome. But yes, I agree. Nord Streams should be dismantled, and Western Europe should completely forfeit its dependence on Russian gas, oil, and what have you. That is my takeaway for this. That is my takeaway. And of course, the problem of the fact that nobody really actually cares about international law, which could be a segment of its own, but I don't think I have the strength for that. What is this? What is this? I wanna, someone just linked something and I wanna see.
Made like a few people independently made the joke of, yeah, that was Donkey Kong who made that big donation. And then I decided in the moment, you know what? Every anonymous donation from here on out is going to be assigned a different Donkey Kong character. And I just kept doing that. And I said, yeah, I'm going to commit to doing that until I run out of Donkey Kong characters. And I ran out of Donkey Kong characters, and during the pre-stream, like
that's so absolutely amazing.
Donated that
Maybe I should call into this. Should I? Do you feel like I should call into this? Holy crap! $2,500,000. Oh wow, that is so cool. I did not know this was happening. Wow. Oh well. Yes, call. I don't know how. I don't know how to call into that, to be quite honest. I don't know what the procedure. Do you know them? Therefore, Philippe August? Do you know this Sarah Z person? No. I have no clue how to call into that. I have no inkling of what I would even need to do. I'll be right back. I will be right back. Don't worry about anything, because I'll be right back. Every show is better with Lucy on it. Well, maybe. I'll be right back. If you have any thoughts, any questions, as always, about anything you've heard, then I don't know what's happening. Feel free to voice. Feel free to voice what you have to say to me. Dan, I keep thinking you're talking about... I'm sorry, I keep thinking that you're talking about the Destiny guy. Okay? And I always confuse time and time again. I made hot chocolate. Very nice. I'll be right back. I need to... Yeah. I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere, okay? No, you're too anti-Semitic. I'm Jewish. Whatever. Whatever. It's not important. I'll be right back. Yes, Greater Rain? It doesn't matter. Okay. Are you gonna make hot chocolate? I don't have any at home. With the tiny marshmallows? I especially don't have those. I especially don't have those. Lukashenko's sham election could be Lukashenko's last. I mean, even he's preparing to create some uh, replacement for himself. So like whatever. I'll be right back. I'm back. So all I see that I've lost 3 people. Sorry. Lucy returns. Yeah, sorry. I was sorry. I had to take care of something. Let's read the chat. Let's talk to the chat a bit. This was a bit of a heavy subject, wasn't it? I think genocide and pipelines are pretty heavy subjects, and we have a few more subjects at hand. So, boss makes 1,000. I make $1. So let's saw the what? Wait, hold on. What happened? Oh my gosh. I think I can convince him. 5 minutes is nothing? Maybe. 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 Okay. Just we continue now. We continue this thing. We can talk about Belarus. We just had a new presidential election in Belarus. You will not guess who has emerged as the victor. You will not guess who emerged as the... Did he win? Who is he? Who do you mean by he? Who is he? I don't know who he is. But yes, Lukashenko of course won. Yes. Lukashenko indeed won, and it's, yeah, not even close. There were sarcastic remarks by politicians, among them Radosław Sikorski, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, wrote that only 80-something% of Belarusians are for their daddy, and therefore will the rest of Belarusian society fit in prison. Indeed, the Belarusian leader has been extremely angry about Polish remarks about the upcoming election. Among them were, again, Sikorski's remarks such as, "Today, the president of Belarus will be chosen. The anticipation of who the victor, of who will win this election is, I cannot bear it. By the way, I would like to ask the media not to call Alexander Lukashenko the last dictator of Europe. That's not fair. Vladimir Putin has far suppressed them when it comes to thievery, repression, and international aggression." So yeah, there were many sarcastic remarks done when it comes to the current election. It's been in the works for a while now. The election has been moved to be earlier than before, and of course, nobody believes this bull crap to be an actual election. Everybody's openly criticizing Lukashenko. It's meaningless. It's a meaningless gesture to criticize openly Lukashenko. Okay, like it's like whatever. Yeah, he has been grilled. Yes, he has been completely destroyed. But the fact remains that once again he is the leader of Belarus. He's a puppet of Putin. Belarus is a puppet state of Russia. That's the current status quo. He actually used to be far more independent, believe it or not. He used to juggle between East and the West, but now he's just much more at the end of the day, the final goal of Russia is to completely absorb Belarus. Sunday's discredited elections in Belarus will likely be President Alexander Lukashenko's last. This is the interesting part that I want to talk about. Not just the fact that Western leaders, Polish leaders, or whatever leaders have criticized them, that there's been a lot of. I mean, we can talk about it. We can laugh a bit about the fact just how many people has called this for what it is, a complete farce. But I want to talk about the opposition a bit. The Belarusian opposition that believes that this sham election might just be Lukashenko's last. A senior figure from the country's exiled democratic forces has said. Franak Vyatorka, chief advisor to opposition leader Sviatlana Tikhanovskaya, added that this is not the time for mass anti-regime rallies. Speaking to TVP World, he also warned that Belarus should not be handed to Russia as a consolation prize or bargaining chip in any negotiations around ending the war in Ukraine. Responding to a recent report about Russia's increased influence over Lukashenko's regime, Vyatorka said that taking Belarus out of Moscow's sphere of influence was in the interest of the European Union and NATO and could function as a security guarantee for Ukraine's independence. He's old, he's sick. I think he's already looking for a replacement, by the way. Lukashenko, that is. I think he's well aware that he will not rule forever and that he is creating a replacement for himself. This weekend's presidential polls, which have already been branded a total sham, I mean, come on, we all knew what was gonna happen. It's not some total shock, okay? We all knew that he would basically give the position to himself again by the European Commission are likely to result in a comfortable victory for the authoritarian Lukashenko, rubber stamping his 30-year-long rule. We call it the special electoral operation, Vyatorka said, riffing on the Russian government's infamous terms for its invasion of Ukraine. Okay, this is actually pretty funny. The special electoral operation. I mean, did it last 3 days? How long was the election in Belarus? It has nothing in common with elections. It doesn't have alternative candidates, no observation, a lot of KGB military, a lot of threats to people. Before the election, people would be visited by, I'm not even sure if Belarus has police or the militia, but they would be visited, and a lot of people were arrested, a lot of people were threatened. The country was put on high alert to prepare itself not to repeat 2020 when the entire country stood up in protest against Lukashenko. But they could prove to be his last, Vyatorka believes. I'm sure that for Lukashenko, this election will be the last one. He is old, he is sick, he doesn't generate energy anymore. He also understands this. Yeah, I think so. He's been talking about moving on for a while now. He's been talking about being replaced by the younger generation that probably he will groom himself or already groomed. True. That's true. That is true, Vladimir. 0.5 less votes than Putin, true. I mean, he cannot get as much as Putin. He cannot be as popular as Putin. That's not really acceptable. Not the time for more mass protests. Mass protests erupted. See, this is the thing. This election has been carefully curated as not to allow what happened in 2022 repeat. Lukashenko has told himself to sort of take a little bit from the last Auschwitz segment. Lukashenko declared never again, and so this time he made sure that mass protests like 4 years ago will not occur. Mass protests erupted in last time in Belarusians went out to elect a president in 2020. Tsikhanouskaya, who only decided to stand after her activist husband was arrested and blocked from putting his name forward, ran a campaign advocating democratic reforms and the release of political prisoners. Yeah, basically, this guy wanted to run for president. He was a presidential candidate. He got arrested, and his wife said, you know what? If my husband was arrested, I'll just run in his place. And so she ran a huge campaign. She was extremely popular in the country. More people turned up to vote than ever. I'm gonna be honest, in 2020, I was 100% sure that she would not win. I was sure that Lukashenko would just rig the election. That part was obvious. But I thought he would do it in an intelligent way. I thought he would say, okay, a record number of people voted for this woman. She almost won. It was close, 51 to 49. But in the end, people chose me. Thank you. It was a fair and square election. We all did our best, whatever, blah, 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 right? The better person won in the end, even if it was close. I thought it would be done in a smart way like that, because so many people went to vote for her. But no, he gave himself about 80% or more of the vote. He declared himself a crushing victory over Tsikhanouskaya, which just enraged people around Belarus. Because again, so many went to the booth to vote for her that it was just enraging that he just gave himself 80%, okay? So, countrywide protests erupted because of that. While official results gave Lukashenko a landslide, I think it was over 80%, Tsikhanouskaya's team claimed she had received between 60 and 70% of the vote where ballots were counted correctly. Yeah, because again, a record number of people went to the voting booth to vote for her. It was a huge hope for change in Belarus for many, many, many people, not just in Belarus, but also in the diaspora. The ensuing unrest brought hundreds of thousands of Belarusians onto the streets in unprecedented scenes, and harsh crackdown led to 7,000 arrests, allegations of detainees being tortured, and at least 3 deaths according to Human Rights Watch. And this was the moment when everybody, at least in this part of the world, were saying that the Belarusian people have woken up from their slumber. They have woken up from their state of being just asleep, of being indifferent to what's happening to their country and to them, that they have been politically awakened, jolted into action, that they will no longer just take what's happening standing, that they stood up. They all stood up and went to protest. 2020 was a year of hope for Belarus. Hope that was, of course, crushed at the end of the day, but was such a year nonetheless. Yatsarka said that the opposition is not advocating mass rallies this time around, saying that the wider conditions are not right. It's not that window of opportunity, he said. We ask people to stay safe on this day and to show their protest by other means. Inside the country where they're forced to vote, we ask them to vote against all candidates. This is also a form of protest. Russia's quiet conquest. Yes, because as always, when it comes to countries in this region, Russia plays a gigantic role. Belarus is part of the Kiev Rush legacy that Russia claims to be the rightful inheritor of. So Russia wants to incorporate into itself Belarus as well as Ukraine. Those are the two main countries that Russia wants to incorporate. And for the longest time now, it has more or less achieved a lot of its goals with Belarus. Belarus is a puppet state of Russia, and more Belarus itself is being incorporated into Russian structures, currency, economy, and so on and so forth. Language, especially Belarusian, is being more and more driven out as the language of the country. And Belarus, a country of 9 million people, is in a different place today where it was 5 years ago. While Tsikhanouskaya effectively heads an EU-based government in exile, standing shoulder to shoulder with Western leaders in international conferences, the regime in Minsk seems to be under increasing Russian influence. That's not a new development. That has been a thing for a long time now. A recent report by the US-based Institute for the Study of War said that the 2020 protests, coupled with the conflict in neighboring Ukraine, have been used by the Kremlin as leverage to accelerate long-term efforts to bring Belarus into the Russian Federation in what it calls a quiet conquest. In return for Moscow's support in fighting the protest movement, Lukashenko has had to agree to further political, economic, and military integration. Analysts claimed, citing Russia's recently acquired permanent defense bases in Belarus as a key example. And I will say that before that period, 2020 and then 2022, Lukashenko has been playing a far more elaborate game of telling Putin, listen, give me this or that, or maybe I will move further to the West. And then he would say to the West, hey, West, give me this or that, or maybe I will decide to move further towards Russia and Putin. It was quite a... He was using the West not to allow Belarus to be swallowed up by Russia completely, while keeping his independence from the West at the same time. A very typical strategy of those who are only self-interested and are mainly interested in the perseverance of their own regime. I would say that a similar strategy is played by Viktor Orban, if we were to name an example. Although Viktor Orban is in a privileged position compared to Lukashenko, because at the end of the day, Orban is able to retain an independence that Lukashenko simply does not have. Belarus must not be a bargaining chip. Vyatorka agrees with the ISW's assessment, but Western governments must not give up on Belarus, he warned. I agree. And Ukraine agrees with this as well, by the way. When there were marches in 2023 to commemorate the 24th of February, when the war erupted, there were many Belarusian groups marching alongside and saying how Belarus must also be free, that Belarus must also be safe, that Belarus must also be liberated from the hands of Russia. Okay? The Democratic opposition is making the case for an independent future for the country in light of increasing pressure for a solution to the war in Ukraine following to the return of power of US President Donald Trump. In case of a possible negotiations on Ukraine, it's very likely Putin will be asking to give him Belarus, and this is what we must not allow to happen, said Vyatorka. Belarus must not be given to Putin as consolation prize or bargaining chip. For that to happen, it's key that Ukraine comes out of the war feeling victorious, he said, adding that taking Belarus out of the Kremlin's grip could be one of the security guarantees that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has consistently asked for. While Lukashenko is in power and Belarus remains under Putin's control, there will be constant threat to Lithuania, Poland, and Latvia, and there will be threat of a new attack, a new invasion from Russia, and there will be a threat of new provocations on the border. If we speak about the peace formula of Zelensky, the neutrality of Belarus perfectly fits this formula because it will be a security guarantee for Ukraine if Belarus becomes democratic. Lukashenko is fragile. Despite the widely accepted illegitimacy of Sunday's election, observers will be keeping an eye out for the Belarusian people's reaction to the results. For Vyatorka, this is not the moment for the public to rise up like they did in 2020. So when could that window of opportunity, as he put it, swing open? It could be connected to Ukraine, could be connected to economic prices, to sanctions, to social issues. Lukashenko's power is fragile, and I think we must find these weak spots and use them. And when geopolitical events around Belarus happening that could open for us, the chance to speak about a new roundtable or a new wave of protest. There are many scenarios, but we must be in a good shape when they appear. And I agree. Otherwise, already chances are opening a bit more because I'm not sure if Russia is in a position to help Lukashenko in the same way that he helped in 2020. But then again, Lukashenko also did his homework and prepared himself a bit more for the protest this year. And since then, he has given the army, the military, a permission in law, enshrined in law, to shoot civilians, to kill, without much consequence, without much legal repercussion. In Belarus, if a soldier feels threatened by a civilian and feels that the soldier is acting in self-defense, the soldier is then allowed to shoot the civilian without being charged with any crime whatsoever. Rich country governments and foundations are generally cowards about this. I think they like supporting some pro-democracy groups, but they're scared to support labor or people who would be independent. Recently, the most entrepreneur philosophy of our times, Alexander Dugin, made a speech something about history and that it's made itself do something with bricks. Of course. Of course he did. Of course he did. Why does that not surprise me? Of course Dugin should be taken into consideration. He's the greatest thinker of our time. Not to take him into consideration would be pure idiocy, okay? It would be pure idiocy not to take it into consideration, okay? My goodness. I feel offended a bit by that you would think that I would not take the great Alexander Dugin into consideration in all my thoughts and prayers and whatever else. You think I'm some sort of a evil person? You think I don't understand sea and land empire? I do. More than anybody. Okay, what else do we have? Let me see. $2.17. Trump. Oh, yeah, that's right. We have to talk about this. This is something that we simply cannot not talk about. We're gonna be talking about. I've got it somewhere. I've got it. Oh, okay. Gaza Strip we're gonna be discussing in a moment. But I wanted to talk about the executive order. The one that there you go. Trump suspends aid to Ukraine. Vital NGOs don't know if they will survive. What? What happened, Vladimir? What happened? Something wrong? Anything? Something the matter? Okay, so I want to say, first of all, I will pour myself a drink. Okay, I will pour myself a drink. I don't know why, but my mind just froze. My brain just froze for a moment. I just froze in my tracks. I was just, I had this moment of, that's okay. I'm back. I'm back, and I'm gonna be talking about Trump suspending. Okay, so whose interview is leaving? Trump's or Dugin's? Okay. So there's been a lot of talk about oh yeah, if you want to link Dugin to me, whatever new crazy speech he's given, then come to this page. Okay? Join this page and share it. Share it here. That's the way. If you want to do it this way, okay? That's the way to do it if you want to do it. That's the way. All right? And then we're okay, let's go back. Let's go back. Let's go back to the whatever thing. Okay. Perfect stream to lure in. Yes, to lure in. To lurken. Oh. Alright. Let's continue. There's been a lot of talk about aid building up to the Trump, Biden, and then Harris election. A lot of people are speculating, will Trump Should he win, just completely stop aid? Will he stop military aid? Will he stop any sort of civilian-based aid? What will he do? He's himself sort of flip-flopped on it. He said that he will reduce it. He said that under certain conditions he'll just continue it. He said many things. Okay? So right off the bat, I would like to say that this suspension of aid to Ukraine does not mean the suspension of military aid. So there's a silver lining in this whole thing. The military aid to Ukraine will not end, and that part will continue. Okay, that part will continue unabated. You don't have to worry about that. That's all fine, secured, and good. No worries on that front. Okay, there's no need to panic. But there are of course bad news, horrible bad news. All other types of aid that are not military have been frozen for 90 days. And this is not just about Ukraine. This applies to all foreign aid, which I don't think I have to explain just how destructive that is. Oh, wait. And hello, welcome to the stream. And we're not really gonna talk about all the repercussions that this sort of thing is gonna have on various different medical, humanitarian causes that the US has been one of the biggest contributors to. We're going to talk about the effects on this when it comes to Ukraine directly. Because Ukraine is... Everybody focuses on military aid, on how many weapons Ukraine gets, but it is very important. The military is the thing that stops the Russian army from just rolling over Ukraine. But at the same time, the Ukrainian economy must continue to function. And also, Ukrainian organizations must function that provide support to people like veterans and other social programs that are fueled by these aid programs from the US. And since that aid is now being frozen by the US for 90 days, which is effectively 3 months, all these programs, all those NGOs' futures are suddenly under threat. They might just disappear. They do not know if they will survive, as the headline itself states. US President Donald Trump's decision to freeze foreign development assistance for 90 days has thrown Ukrainian organizations into turmoil, in some cases threatening their very existence and leaving the people they support in limbo, so like veterans, for example, and their families. These non-profit organizations provide a huge range of humanitarian services, including counseling, organizing cultural events, and providing basic services often to some of the most vulnerable segments of society. Honestly, we still don't fully understand the scope of the impact this decision will have on the civic sector and everyone affected. Olha Kuchner, head of the services department at Veteran Hub, an NGO that supports Ukrainian soldiers, war veterans, and their families, told the Kyiv Independent on January 27th. Yes, via a an executive order. It seems like this has been done via an executive order. He has signed an executive order that will put all the humanitarian aid under review for 90 days. And this is not just for Ukraine, this is for everybody. Some countries were, of course, exempt from this. Among them, surprise, surprise, Israel. Israel is one of the countries that is exempt from this. What a shocker, I know. The civic sector plays a massive role in supporting veterans and their families, particularly through psychological services, as we do. One of Trump's first actions upon entering the White House was, and here it goes, to sign an executive order freezing foreign development assistance for 90 days to conduct a review and ensure it aligns with the new administration's policies. No. Okay, I will repeat it again because you came in after I have already started. This is humanitarian aid. This is aid for the civic sector being frozen. This does not affect military aid. Right? So while Ukraine can hold out, even without this, it still will suffer a lot because of this, if that makes sense. Okay? Like this is the aid to organizations that I've listed here, NGOs that help veterans, their families, social programs, cultural events, basic services, right? It plays a massive role in supporting veterans and their families, right? So yeah, while the military itself might not suffer for this, the Ukrainian society itself definitely will. Yeah, it will hurt the Ukrainian people, exactly. And again, this order does not just affect Ukraine. It affects every single place in the world where the US has been providing humanitarian assistance, with the exception of Israel and maybe one more country, I don't remember, but a lot of places in the world will actually suffer for this. I'm focusing on Ukraine here, but a lot of places will suffer. And combine it with the fact that the United States are now leaving the World Health Organization, and you can see that things are looking to not be very interesting. So yeah. The wording of the executive order was broad, making no distinction between humanitarian and military aid and no mention of any exceptions. I know that Zelensky has reacted to this, and Zelensky has actually announced that the Ukrainian military aid will not be affected by this. Veteran Hub, an NGO supporting Ukrainian soldiers, war veterans, and their families in Kyiv. I should actually visit this place. Ukrainian veterans at Veteran Hub, an NGO supporting Ukrainian soldiers. The Pentagon clarified on January 23rd that relating to Ukraine, the directive only applies to development programs, not military support. President Volodymyr Zelensky said on January 25th that the US aid had not stopped flowing to Ukraine. See? This is what I actually said that just a second ago, but now it has confirmation in the article itself. Zelensky says that the military aid to Ukraine will not be affected. but any relief that crucial U.S. weapons would still be sent to Ukraine was tempered by the prospect of pause in humanitarian aid. This was compounded a day later when U.S. State Secretary Marco Rubio issued stop work orders on nearly all existing foreign assistance grants. The orders were effective immediately. What's the link? Oh, right. Thank you for the $5, by the way. Thank you very much. State Gestoli went nuclear on foreign assistance, one unnamed State Department official told Politico. As a result, the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, was ordered to stop projects in Ukraine. Affected organizations were notified on the decision on the morning of January 25th. Ukraine recently tops the recipient list of U.S. development assistance as it continues to face Russia's war, official data shows. Since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion, USAID has provided Ukraine with $2.6 billion in humanitarian aid, $5 billion in development assistance, and more than $30 billion in direct budget support. The budget support is very necessary because if the budget cannot function in Ukraine, then that will absolutely affect the war machine in Ukraine. Without a functional economy, Ukraine would not be able to wage a war. It would lead to the collapse of many institutions of Ukraine. It would lead to the cease of paying social workers, just governmental workers, teachers, nurses. It would lead to a stop of paying out pensions to people, of paying retirement to people, and that, by the way, would inevitably create a new immigration crisis. Right? Maybe. So this is a prospect that we should be prepared for. At a stroke, organizations in Ukraine have been left in dire financial straits. One of them is Tsukr, an NGO and media outlet based in Sumy, a city in northeastern Ukraine located just 30 kilometers from the Russian border that has been heavily affected by the war. And speaking of Sumy, okay, I have recently watched a very interesting documentary that is based in Sumy. So if you're interested in what that region is, where this NGO is, Sumy, a city in northeastern Ukraine. Sumy is a whole region. Sumy is not just a city, it's a whole, the Sumsky region, right? So if you want to know more about Sumy and actually what's happening, the situation there, maybe even to learn more about the counteroffensive into Kursk, then I highly recommend you to watch a documentary on it. I'm actually gonna link it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna link the thing. Hold on. Lucy has a /live. I'm gonna log in. How do I log in? Log in. I have to log into my own thing to be able to do anything. Where is Filip August? I've got you. There you go. I highly recommend this documentary. I'm gonna also link it in the YouTube. There you go. You should watch it. It's pretty good. And I feel like it's a travesty that people like the Zoomer Historian are getting hundreds of thousands of views and videos like this are not. So whatever I can add to fight this injustice, I'll probably do. Oh, okay. Link it in the page. You cannot link. You cannot give me links in YouTube. You have to join the page if you want to give me links, Vladimir. Okay, let's continue. There is the NGO called Sukr, an NGO based in Sumy, which gave me an opportunity to share this nice documentary. A city in northeastern Ukraine, located just 30 kilometers from the Russian border, that has been heavily affected by the war. If we lose all of our US funding, we won't last 90 days without additional support. If we Dmytro Tishchenko, Cukr co-founder, told the Kyiv Independent. As well as being a media channel, Cukr, which means sugar in Ukrainian with a tweak. By the way, in Polish, you say sugar as cukier. So I sort of immediately knew that this was sugar when I saw the name, because in Polish it's just cukier. As well as being a media channel, Cukr organizes concerts and festivals and also provides educational workshops on business and mental health, badly needed resources for those living in a region that is one of the hardest hit by daily Russian missile, glide bomb, and drone attacks. Because we must remember that war for children inevitably means education gap. That'll just happen no matter what. Education gap will happen. So organizations stepping in to fill in the gaps and to try to provide more education are worth probably more than gold, actually. And this is why the funding is crucial for them. Tishchenko said 30% of the organization's funding was currently frozen, and all planned events tied to that money had been cancelled. So all the events died, basically. Even if we try to use alternative resources for these projects, we'll need to rethink how to implement them, he said. Valery Garmash, head of the Makes Sense, an NGO dedicated to developing independent journalism in Ukraine, told the Kyiv Independent that the US aid freeze, even if lifted after 90 days, threatens to the survival of her organization and others like it. So you can see, while this is not affecting directly the aid to the military, it still is a big, big deal, a huge deal. In Ukraine alone, we're not even discussing the effects that it will have in other parts of the world. We're just discussing Ukraine right now, right? It is worth keeping in mind. A large number of organizations will simply cease to exist. They don't know how they are supposed to survive, she said, adding, great organizations, valuable organizations, important organizations, but they really could and theoretically might just stop existing. This is what happens when you have unreliable allies, by the way. You build entire infrastructures built on promises, built on certain commitments, and then they're just cut off. That also damages the reputation of the United States, by the way. Don't make don't make a mistake about that. People will know that when it comes to cooperation, when it comes to investment in important health related, development related, education related projects, the US cannot be counted on as a reliable partner. It just cannot. It can flake at any moment and just retreat. Garmash said that the US aid freeze will have an enormous impact on the work of Make Sense, potentially threatening a hub it operates in Slovyansk, a city in embattled Donetsk Oblast that supports journalists heading to report from the front lines. So it also hurts directly journalism in Ukraine. It would mean we simply wouldn't be able to support them, provide them with bulletproof vests, helmets, medical kits, give them a place to work, charge their equipment, or even just have coffee in a warm space, she said. And that is important. That is very, very important. Because believe it or not, independent journalism is extremely expensive, and not every individual journalist is able to procure the funds necessary to continue their work. And this is where funds like this are extremely helpful. Right? As well as the precarious financial situation now facing the NGOs, individuals working from them have lost their jobs, at least temporarily. The head of a regional office for a State Department-funded organization in Ukraine spoke with the Kyiv Independent on condition of anonymity due to the fear of retaliation for speaking out. He said that the organization has projects funded by USA that involve Ukrainian contractors. Due to the freeze, they will lose income from these projects. I explained the situation to them, and they're part-time contractors. This might not be their only livelihood, but for some people it will be, he said. 3 months can be a very long time. It can be, especially when it comes to things like this, especially during war. And if they can't pay their rent or something like that, that's the situation that these people can be in. Hopes had been raised that Ukraine could be made exempt from the US aid freeze on January 25th, when the Financial Times reported that senior diplomats in the State Department Bureau of European and Eurasian Affairs requested a full waiver for operations in Ukraine, citing national security concerns. I mean, there's a war raging in Ukraine, so of course Ukraine should be an exemption. This had gone unheeded a day later when a U.S. State Department press release said Rubio had paused all U.S. foreign assistance funded by or through the State Department and USAID for review. There are a few exceptions. I believe Israel is indeed an exception. But an American working for a State Department funded organization in Ukraine told the Kyiv Independent on condition of anonymity that the waiver could still be being processed. Oh, okay. So I guess there's still hope for Ukraine. There are many countries that will suffer for this, a lot. It's unlikely that they would have received an answer by now. I mean, it's only Monday, they said, adding, I don't think any waivers would have been processed in time. It's possible that a waiver for Ukraine could still happen. I'm not sure if it's hope, or I'm actually not sure if this is pure hope, but the Kyiv Independent contacted USAID about the status of the waiver request but had not received a reply at the time of publication. In any case, until either the 90 days are up and US aid assistance resumes, or the waiver request is approved, some of the most vulnerable people in Ukraine will be left without crucial support. Kucher, head of the services department at Veterans Hub, says that as well as providing in-person counseling and support to veterans, the organization's 24-hour support hotline handles 1,300 calls a month. For veterans and their families, knowing that there's someone they can rely on at any time, it is crucial, she said. Any change, especially in uncertain times like these, is challenging for everyone. It's unpredictable. It's unsettling. And it's destructive. And it erodes trust in the US as a partner and as an ally. So yeah, that's the news. Any thoughts? I've explained more or less why this is. I could find some articles that would explain why how this will affect other countries, but I think we got the idea more or less. I believe we've got the gist. Oh my gosh. Oh, Nicolas Diorio. What? What the hell? What? But yes. Any thoughts, questions, or whatever? Anything? What else do we have? $4.25. Well, if there's nothing, then I guess I'll just do the thing tomorrow that I want. The last thing I'll do tomorrow. I'm feeling a bit tired. So I guess I'll finish up. Okay. Is Philippe Auguste still here? And if so, who are we rating today? Who are we rating today? Philippe Auguste. Live chat. Who are we rating today? Hello, Auntie Lou. Hello. I hope you've enjoyed. I'm not sure if you've just arrived, but I hope you've, President Sunday, The Line. Vegcom. Okay, Vegcom it is then. Alright, I'll see you today, which is tomorrow, but no, we'll go with Vegcom. That's fine. Okay, I'll see you, okay? Good night. Good night. Okay, you caught 10 minutes. I hope you've enjoyed. I really do. Alright, I'll see you, okay? I'll see you today, which is tomorrow. Thank you very much. Thank you. You need more audience. Well, I'll do my best to work on that. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll see you. Bye-bye. Did you cover the Zoomer Historian yesterday? I only covered part of the video. Maybe we'll finish it tonight. Tomorrow. I covered part of his video. I did not finish the video yet. Okay. See you. Bye-bye.